All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be breaking down the underrated Big Ten matchup between Nebraska and the 16th ranked Indiana Hoosiers. 6.5 point line in favor of IU. 50.5 is the total. 12 p.m. Eastern Time on Fox from Memorial Stadium in Bloomington. Starting with the Nebraska offense, it started off, encouraging. They beat Colorado pretty good. They beat up on some lower tier opponents. They had, solid outings, I guess, for the most part. Raiola looked good against Illinois. They ended up blowing that lead, though, and lost that game. Since then, though, it's not been great. Shutout in the first half against Purdue. Only scored 14 against the Rutgers and only 261 total yards. And you start with Raiola. This is, a 5-star quarterback, true freshman. Obviously, it's going to be a bumpy road. 9 touchdowns, 3 picks, 226 yards per game. He's having an all-right season, but the last couple weeks, he's not been as much of a difference maker. And again, I thought he played great in the loss to the Fighting Illini. But the last two, it's not been very good. They've struggled to make big plays through the air against Rutgers. Was a pretty good defense. They were able to outlast them in that game, but it was a tough effort. Completed only 41% for 134 yards and interception in that one. Going on the road against a defense that's relatively untested at this moment in time. Nebraska does have some nice weapons, though. Isaiah Neyor is a big play receiver. Jamal Banks has great hands. Jalen Lloyd and Ja'Cory Barney, I think these guys can provide a lot as well. What do you make of this passing attack going on the road here, Nick, where I think they could have a big day again against the Hoosier defense we haven't really seen too much out of? But it's been a struggle fest for the last month now, it seems, with Nebraska, and their ceiling for this year just seems incredibly limited, especially now that they're entering conference play.
Early on in the season, it looked like Nebraska's offense would hit a level that we've not seen them previously hit, with Raiola looking really comfortable and confident. 1,300 yards passing, 9 touchdowns, 3 picks. They had some success against some weaker opponents, had some success against Purdue, put up 24 points in the loss against Illinois, but they've struggled as of late, and that Illinois game was not phenomenal. Raiola, like he rattled off, only 134 yards passing and 1 pick, only 261 total yards of offense against Rutgers. Yes, it's a phenomenal defense, but still only 261 in a game. They only won by 7 points, so it's certainly concerning going into this one. I think Raiola obviously expected some, jitters as a younger player, true freshman stepping in. 60% comp rate is still really solid, and he's have some solid receivers. Right? This offense has been good. I think, certainly, again, you expected some of these issues, and now you're going on the road to an Indiana team that's got a lot of energy at 6-0. That environment's probably going to be pretty loud there on Saturday. A tough place to play with that fan base being loud and proud. I think Raiola, he's got to be a little more confident, has to step up a little bit more in the pocket and just be that little bit more confident. Obviously, growing pains were expected, but when he struggles, this whole offense struggles, and it certainly puts them in a tough position against a really good team in Indiana.
I think this offensive line, they certainly haven't really progressed like we thought they would. They've been relatively good with all this experience. Obviously they used to be the worst O-line in CFB, and they've certainly worked their way up there. Tucker Corcoran, that is, at left tackle. He's been all right. Gunnar Godula, those two have been playing even snaps. Neither has really stepped out. Justin Evans-Jennings, I think he's been Jenkins, that is, at left guard. I think he's probably been the best potentially so far. Ben Scott, great veteran center. He leads the way. Hunter Latufuski at right guard and then right tackle. They have another veteran in Bryce Benhart, who's I think he's probably been the best one, quite frankly, even though he allowed team high 12 pressures. What do you think of this offensive line, Nick? Because the run game we'll talk about in a minute, it's also kind of stalled out a little bit. But these guys need to be more physically dominant. They seem to be trying to sort things out, and I think at this point in the season, I expected them to be a little bit better than they are right now.
The offensive line has had some struggles. The interior has been a little weak at times. I think the offensive line has shown a bit of issues here, which is leading them to not be able to run the ball, which is certainly impacting this offense's ability to stay on schedule and get the job done. Certainly got to be strong here. I know the Indiana defense is not the best unit in the world, but they still have some talented pieces that could make some things happen. So you want to see this offensive line stand up strong. They got to be better in this game.
Yeah, I don't think Corcoran, he's probably going to be playing in this game. He's been injured for a couple weeks now, so it's certainly a man down. Godula has been solid in his spot, but they have, again, for the year, played even snaps, so they're pretty confident in his abilities to step in. And of course, this run game, I think they're pretty deep backfield. Dante Dowdell from Oregon has stepped up, 334 yards, 5 touchdowns. Emmett Johnson, Ramir Johnson, I think these two backs, they've been splitting carries for the most part this year. Ramir's kind of fallen down the depth chart, though. They're putting up about 136 yards per game. Early on in the year, they started off good, Nick, but, less than 100 against Rutgers. only 50 against Illinois, even though the run game wasn't that bad. I know some sacks to Raiola really lowered that number, so it really wasn't 48. I think I calculated around 100 yards or so. So the run game hasn't been as stout as it was early on in the season. I think against the Hoosiers, again, an unproven defense. They're not going to be overwhelming up front by any mean. This is a great opportunity for them to get back on track.
This is certainly a great opportunity for this rushing attack that has to be better this year, 136 yards per game on the ground. Would like to see that number be a little bit higher. Dante Dowell has been really good, 334 yards rushing and 5 touchdowns. Emmett Johnson, 207 and a score for him. He's been solid at times. They've gotten a little bit off the pace. Certainly have to be a little bit better running the ball. I think Dowell has to have a good day here. He's been a leader for this team. Expect some carries for him. They got to try and attack this weakness, which is some parts of this defense for Indiana. Have a good day on the ground and stay in front of the sticks is the big key to success here.
And now we look at a Indiana offense. Coming into the year, I only picked this team to win 6 games because I thought that the defense might let them down a good bit. I wasn't sure how quickly this offense that I thought was absolutely loaded would click, and man, they have clicked right off the bat. I'm incredibly proud of what Curtis Rourke, kind of a less known guy coming from Ohio. He was a very good player for the Bobcats for a couple years, had a bad leg injury, and now he's back at full health, and this unit is clicking. 500-plus yards in 3 straight games, going up against Maryland and Northwestern, putting up 40-plus in those ones. And this has been a very impressive unit, and he's been a tactician for them, Nick. 47.5 points per game so far, 14 touchdowns, just shy of 300 yards per game, only 2 picks. This guy has been phenomenal and highly accurate, 74% completion rating. You can look at their opponents and say these aren't the toughest by any means. This is no fluke, Nick, what he's doing here, especially when you look at the group of pass catchers that they have. Elijah Surratt, the JMU transfer, leading the way at 513. This is a legitimate talent. Omar Cooper Jr. got 375. Miles Price, the Texas Tech transfer, has always been a bit of a productive player in his career. Miles Cross also came over from Ohio. And then Keyshawn Williams leads the team with 4 touchdowns. They're 5 deep here at receiver, Nick. What do you make of this passing attack that I just absolutely love watching this year, and I'm proud of the Hoosiers?
Phenomenal passing attack. Curtis Rourke, I always thought he was a solid quarterback at Ohio, but I wonder how he would transition in a jump up in competition. He's been really good so far. 73% comp rate, 1,700 yards passing, 14 touchdowns and 2 picks. He looks really confident in the pocket. He's a really talented player. It helps when you have a great wide receiver. Miles Cross followed him from Ohio, and those two have picked up where they left off. 208, 12.2, and 2 scores for him. Elijah Surratt's been incredible. 513 yards receiving, 17.7 yards per grab, 2 scores. Omar Cooper's been a big play threat, 375, 20.8, and 3 scores, while Miles Price has been solid, 266. Keyshawn Williams has 4 grabs, a nice red zone threat. Zach Horton has 2 touchdowns on 9 grabs. Addison Colby as well has a touchdown grab on 2. He has 2 grabs, one of them for a touchdown. He's a nice big play threat in rotation. So they're a very deep unit here, a lot of talented pieces. They're averaging 315 yards per game through the air. Really solid unit. This is a big key to success. They got to attack the secondary early, go after them, and try and put points on the board.
And what's even crazier about this receiving room is Cam Camper, East Boise State's leading receiver, transferred out. Donovan McCulley's probably the most talented of the bunch. He's not played this year due to injury. Now he's going to transfer out of the program. So these guys have had something in the water at wide receiver, even though this is largely a group of transfers. You look at their backfield that was also 4 guys deep, mainly because of transfers. Tyson Lawton and Kalen Black from JMU, they've both been productive. Mainly Lawton, who has 7 touchdowns, while Justice Ellison from Wake Forest has been the leading runner at 409 yards and 6 touchdowns. They've been a very complimentary attack, 200 rushing per game for them. I don't see any issues really with this rushing attack other than this by far is the top run D they're going to face, Nick. So what kind of issues might this offense face if they can no longer run the ball and O'Rourke is starting to see a little bit more pressure in his face? Do you think they'll be phased at all, or do you think they're just clicking at too high of a rate to slow down?
It's certainly concerning. I think that's one key point you want to isolate if you want to see a way for Nebraska to win this game, because they've been really good keeping on schedule running the ball. 200 yards per game on the ground, 5.1 yards per carry, and 3.8 touchdowns per game on the ground. Really high numbers, really successful numbers. Ellison has been really good, 409 and 6 touchdowns for him. Tyshawn Lawton, 329 and 7 scores, while Elijah Green and Keon Black have 5 touchdowns between the two of them. O'Rourke also has 2 rushing touchdowns in the red zone. He can be a short distance threat on the ground. So this is a very talented rushing attack that has multiple different ways to hit you, and I think that's certainly a key here. They're facing a very tough run defense, a very stingy run defense for Nebraska that has been strong so far this season, only giving up a really solid number on defense, like 84 yards per game. So below 100 yards per game given up. This is a big test. Which unit will step out and win the battle? I think the Indiana rushing attack will win the battle, that is, but it's certainly one to keep an eye on.
Now you look at an offensive line that in years past, at least under Tom Allen, was incredibly poor for Indiana. Carter Smith, a third-year man for this team, has been a phenomenal left tackle. Left guard Drew Evans has also been very sound in pass protection. Mike Caddick at center, not much penetration being allowed his way. Bray Lynch at right guard, and then right tackle Trey Wettig. I mean, this offensive line has been phenomenal this year, Nick. There's not many holes that have been exposed, and they just played a good Northwestern team that has a good defense and a very good deep defensive line as well, and they still put up 529 yards in that contest. Overall, though, again, they've not played much. I think Maryland and Northwestern have respectable defenses, maybe even above average defenses is a good way to put it, and they've passed the test so far, but this is a completely different ballgame. This is almost a borderline elite defense from Nebraska. How do you think this offensive line will look, where they have not been cracked really at all this year?
This is an interesting offensive line that's been really solid. They've stood up. They've been strong. I like what they have in the interior. I think the exterior is solid as well. A unit that returned a couple different younger pieces, a very young unit, a couple redshirt sophomores on there. But I've been happy. This is a tough test because Nebraska, like I said, is a really good run defense, allowing below 100 yards per game. They get after the quarterback. They're strong in getting in the backfield. Rourke's got to be confident. His offensive line's got to protect them. I think if they can give Rourke time to create his opportunities, they'll have success. But I could certainly see this Nebraska pass rush getting in there, causing some disruption, and being a very strong force against his offensive line that still is pretty inexperienced, having not played a really top, talented pass rush yet this season.
Now we move to that Nebraska defense, and it's maybe not much of the pass rush off the edge as it is the one on the interior between Ty Robinson and Nash Hutchmacher. These guys are phenomenal. Great power, great strength, and good experience as well. Tony White runs a great scheme here that really allows these guys to crack down. They weren't as splendid as against Illinois as they probably should against the run. Gave up 166 yards in that game. Other than that, they've been flat out dominant against everyone they have played. And I know they haven't played the toughest of opponents either on the ground. You got Purdue, Rutgers, though, and Kyle Mongai. Those guys have been pretty good at running the football. It's a pretty one-dimensional offense, though, so maybe that allowed them to do much better in that game. Indiana, though, far from one-dimensional, so I certainly think that this offensive line will have to do more, or the D-line, that is, will have to do more than just stop the run, have to be good against the pass as well. You look at guys like James Williams, though, MJ Sherman, Jamari Butler, he's starting to get back into full force compared to last year. He only has one sack again on the season. That was against Colorado. This is a great Nebraska defensive line, Nick. They're not giving up much on the ground. They didn't last year either. Making plays in the backfield. I think this might be an opportunity to expose an O-line where everything's just been flat out perfect for the Hoosiers this year. We're not going to find out how battle-tested they are, though.
This is certainly an opportunity for a very strong defensive line to have a good day. They've been really good so far this season, but they've still struggled to get those big sack numbers that you hoped out of them. Nash Hutchmacher, 16 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. Ty Robinson, 14 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. Leads the teams in both of those categories. MJ Sherman, 14 total tackles for him, plus 2.5 sacks. Cameron Lenhart, 11 total tackles for him, 2 tackles for loss. Jamari Butler, has 9 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss. Princewell Unamulan has 8 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss. Elijah Judy has 5 and 1.5 tackles for loss for him. So nice rotational, nice depth across the board here. This is a really strong unit. Ty Robinson's a big piece of this defense with 3 pass breakups as well. Expect him to have a big day if Nebraska's going to want to win this game.
Look at the middle of this defense. They got some guys in the secondary. They'll creep into the box, but it's mainly just been these 2 linebackers, John Bullock and Makai Gabor. Bullock, he's great in coverage, and I think Gabor is maybe better of a run defender. But overall, there's a nice blend of what they can provide here in the middle of this defense. Stephon Thompson's the other linebacker who will truly get on the field, and this guy is great, reuniting with Tony White, of course. He hasn't getting on the field as much this year because the 2 guys in front of him are that good. Thompson's a great ball player, though, Nick, so even if he's playing limited snaps, he can make an impact. I think that's just a test to how good this middle of the defense is. What do you expect out of the linebackers in this game as well? Because I think it's going to be a very interesting contest to see how they defend the middle of the field against the pass, where Indiana loves to throw mesh routes and concepts underneath, and that's where they can really do a lot of damage.
I love what Bullock can do in coverage. I think he's a key piece against those mesh routes underneath. He's a really strong linebacker who's been really good in coverage. 33 total tackles, leads the team in that number. 5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, a pick 6, and 3 pass breakups. Good numbers. Makai Gabor has been really good as well. 30 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and a pass breakup. Stephon Thompson, I like what he's done in rotational appearances. 14 total tackles for him, plus a pass breakup. This is a unit that's not super deep, but I think those 3 guys add a lot of abilities for this defense. Vincent Shavers is a true freshman who is the other linebacker. Doesn't get a whole lot of reps as a true freshman, but he does have 8 total tackles. I like this linebacker core. I think it's a good unit for Nebraska here.
Now you look at a secondary that I think is absolutely splendid, one of the best in the country. At corner, Marquise Buford playing all right ball, probably not as good as transfer C at right. And of course, Tommy Hill, they're hoping to have him back because he's probably the best defensive back on this roster. Likely going to be back in action for this game. If not, it's a big loss. We alluded to how good the receiving group is for Indiana. They're going to be needing guys that can cover. And you look at the slot. Malcolm Hartzong is a phenomenal player. Has 2 interceptions on the season. He's going to be their main slot guy. He's been good against the run. Not as good as tackler though, with 7 of those missed. And his coverage performance has been a little bit shaky, but does have those ball skills. Isaac Gifford, Deshaun Singleton, 2 versatile safeties. Those are the guys who get in the box mainly. Their play has been a little bit iffy at times. Gifford, though, he's a great veteran for them. Singleton, I think he provides great play and coverage. This is a phenomenal secondary, Nick, and of course, if they get Tommy Hill back, they'll be in for a pretty respectable day, you would think. This will be the ultimate test, though. How can this secondary hold up against Indiana? They're going to look to attack the intermediate routes. That's what Illinois did with a lot of success. The secondary wasn't that good in that contest. So what do you think is going to happen here? Because this defense really is good, but they haven't been perfect.
They haven't been perfect so far this season, but they do have some solid pieces. They're going to have a strong game here. I look at the top players here. Isaac Gifford has been good, 32 total tackles plus a pass breakup. Deshaun Singleton, 29 total tackles and a pass breakup. Malcolm Hartzog, 2 picks, 2 pass breakups, 22 total tackles. Marquise Buford has been solid, 15 total tackles, 5 pass breakups plus a pick. He's been your best coverage asset. Tommy Hill has been good, 14 total tackles plus a pick for him. He's got to be a key piece for here. Some other players, Derek Branch has been solid for this team at times so far this season in rotational depth. We want to see what he can do in this game. Overall, this is a secondary unit that's a good unit. They haven't been super tested. They haven't faced a whole lot of talented quarterbacks. I think Luke Altmaier and Shedeur Sanders are probably your 2 best, but Sanders had a really uncharacteristic bad day in that Colorado game. Altmaier had a pretty decent day at times, especially in that second half. So it's going to be a test here because Rourke's a very good quarterback who is lighting up the score sheet so far and lighting up the yards number as well. They're going to test him. They're going to attack the secondary. Who will come out on top? I think it's a close battle, but I think Rourke gets the edge right now. The secondary has to play very strong in this matchup.
Yeah, they were very good against Colorado. They also had 6 sacks that certainly helped that as well. The last thing I'll say about the Illinois game is they didn't, create like we typically see. Only had 2 TFL in that game. The run defense was a little less polished. I just alluded to some of the passing defense issues they had in a game that was a home contest for them. Looking at the Indiana defense now, and again, this is a team that hasn't had the toughest of schedules, but I think Maryland, they have weapons, they have nice receivers, a very good running back, a quarterback that's, a dual threat player. In the Northwestern, they don't really have much of an offense outside of maybe a physical running game, but they held them in check. The run defense hasn't been beat up at all. They had allowed 137 yards to Charlotte in a blowout game, so really garbage time numbers there. They're holding opponents, though, to 400 or less per game, 255 yards per game. Matter of fact, they've only given up over 400 once. That was the Maryland, though. This is a defense that's played good this year, Nick, and I certainly had my concerns coming into the year, how they would play. Transfer from JMU, Mikhail Kamara has been elite off the edge. He was a great player for the Dukes, and he's doing it here for the Hoosiers with 7.5 TFL and 5 sacks. Next to him, you have James Carpenter, who has 4.5 TFL. Tyreek Tucker, CJ West. They're getting a lot out of this defensive line right now. This will be one of the better offensive lines they've faced. Certainly not an overwhelming one by any stretch of the imagination, but just not enough of a sample size, which is crazy for a team that's played 6 games, Nick. But that's the matter of the fact the offenses they have played are not all that good, but ones that probably could have burned them if they were bad.
This is certainly something you look at. There are 2 talented players here, Carpenter and Kamara, that came over from JMU. Kamara, 20 total tackles, 7.5 tackles lost, 5 sacks, plus a forced fumble that he recovered. He's been really good. Carpenter, 13 total tackles, 4.5 tackles lost, 3 sacks. West has been good as well with 12 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and a sack, while Burris has 9 total tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, plus a sack. This is a unit that has not been fully tested yet. I agree with that assessment. They haven't played a whole lot of talented offenses, but this is a really good unit here. It's a nice matchup here against this offensive line. Very even matchup, in my opinion. If they can go out there and play strong early on and dominate in the trenches, they could set the tone early in this game. You got to have a good day coming off the edge from Kamara. He's got to be dominant in this one.
You look at the middle of their defense, also occupied by JMU transfers Aiden Fisher and Jalen Walker. These are 2 very good players. Walker's the veteran, but Fisher has almost 20 more tackles than he does, and they've played very good. The bump up in competition hasn't been a problem for them. They've been efficient tacklers. They've been good against the run. In coverage, though, I think there's certainly areas they can be vulnerable. They have not been very good in coverage. They've allowed these two linebackers have allowed more coverage yards than anyone else on this team. So I think this is a bit of a concern because there is some playmakers that can certainly hurt you on this Nebraska offense. Maybe not just in the passing game, but up the middle against the run. And, being creative and getting those guys in space can potentially be a weakness for the Hoosiers. So these are two good players. They understand the scheme and they're leaders, but in a game like this, it could certainly be a little iffy for them.
Aiden Fisher has been a really dominant tackler, having 21 total tackles, more than the next highest tackler, which is Walker. Fisher has 55, 3 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, a pass breakup. Walker has been good in coverage, 34 total tackles, 3 pass breakups, 2 tackles for loss, and your second leading tackler right there. And then Rojelon Hardy has been really solid as rotational pieces as well, with 9 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, a sack, and a pick 6 for him. He's been really good coming off the bench. I do like what he's been able to do. A solid piece as a redshirt freshman. This unit, I think this is a good unit, though. I think this is a unit that, again, hasn't been tested. That's the story of this Indiana team. They haven't been super tested. This is a unit that I do like, though. I think Fisher's a good leader, a really good tackler. Is the coverage a little bit concerning with him sometimes? Yes, but I think he is a great tackler that makes up for that, and I expect him to have a solid day here.
Now you look at his secondary, also has a handful of transfers. You have Jameer Johnson and D'Angelo Pons, another guy that came from JMU, was great for them last year. He's been pretty good this season, especially in coverage. Johnson has also been as equally as good for them. So, they haven't really been all that tested so far. Like we keep alluding to, Amari Farrell in the slot. He was one of the more talented players that Indiana was able to retain at safety. He's having a respectable season in his own right. And then you look at, Sean Osbury, Old Dominion transfer, who plays a lot in the box as well, a lot of safety, a bit of a versatile weapon here in the secondary. He has some respectable ball skills. He's been a bit of a poor tackler this year, though. He's going to have to step up and be better in the box against Nebraska rushing attack. It's going to want to be physical, and they're going to want to be able to, have fresh legs in there all game long. So this is secondary, Nick. I certainly, alluded to them probably being poor throughout the year in the preseason. So far, they've passed the test against Maryland. Caden Prather and Ty Felton. Those are two of the best receivers you're going to see all year. So far, though, they've been good. Do you think there's an opportunity here for them to get dusted?
This is a good unit here. They certainly have a tough test, but I think, Raiola has struggled as of late to hit the deep ball. Ashbury's been really good, 33 total tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, 2 pass breakups. D'Angelo Pons has been good, 28 total tackles, 5 pass breakups. He's been really good in coverage. Amari Farrell has been solid, 24 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 2 picks, and a pass breakup. Jameer Johnson, 18 total tackles. Jamari Sharp has been good in coverage, 6 total tackles, 5 pass breakups for him. Terry Jones, 7 total tackles. It's a unit that's still probably the weakest part on this team overall, in my opinion, but they are still a strong enough unit, I think, and Raiola has shown some struggles at throwing the deep ball as of late, so I don't think it's a total mismatch here for this secondary, but this is a unit that I'm keeping my eye on in the rest of the season because they have been disappointing at times. They slipped a little bit over the last couple of games, and it is slightly concerning.
Yeah, I certainly wonder if they're going to be able to create enough pass rush. They did have 5 sacks against Maryland, but, they only had 4 across the other 3 games around that time. So I'm just not sure what we're going to see outside of Kamara in terms of pass rush. So I think there's going to be opportunities for the secondary to be tested. We'll go to the tail of the tape now. On offense, I think the O-line is going to be even though they've been outstanding up front. The Hoosiers have also played lower-tiered competition compared to Nebraska. And then you look at, the rest of the positions. I think quarterback's clear edge, running back, they're incredibly deep, and wide receiver as well. I mean, these are good edges, Nick, but I wouldn't call them overwhelming on the offensive side of the ball compared to the defensive side, where those are overwhelming edges, and there's no real, discussion to be had.
It's very clear here that this is a battle of a great offense versus a great defense. In this one, I think this is a situation where I like the great offense a little bit more. I think they have a higher ceiling than the great defense. This is a very strong Nebraska defense, a great unit. Indiana still has some weaknesses on defense. We have seen them be good so far this year, but when you look at it, they gave up 24 points and 28 points to Northwestern and Maryland over the past 2 weeks. This is a unit that I like at times, this defense, but I think the secondary worries me. This is a fair tale of the tape. I think Nebraska is clearly the better team on defense. Well, in my opinion, I think you give the O-line to Indiana as well. Just the better team on offense across the board.
Now I'd move to the final thoughts and the prediction, keys to the game. I think for Nebraska, find some big pass plays, collapse that Indiana run game. And then I think for Indiana, let Rourke keep doing his thing. He's airing it out, and he's being very efficient and accurate. Defense, prove you can compete. I'm scared for Indiana in this game, Nick. I think this is America's team, quite frankly. I love Cignetti, everything he stands for. I'm a big Hoosiers fan. 26-20 prediction for me. I think Nebraska will cover, and they'll keep this one close. I really think they can win this game outright, though, just because the matter of fact is they've not seen a defense like this one bit, and I also don't think they've seen an offense that can probably provide what Nebraska can. Even though they've struggled significantly, they still have some balance they can provide, unlike these other teams they have faced up to this moment in time. because, Maryland, they're trying to win a shootout. Nebraska, they're not going to get a shootout. You're not going to do that to this defense. And I certainly think this is an opportunity for them to get exposed in a variety of different ways. Rourke, though, a veteran quarterback's played a lot of football. I think he'll do well in this game. And I think the Hoosiers off a bye week will be well prepared. So I think they're on upset alert. And I really think this is a game they might lose. I'm going to pick them to win this one slightly, Nick. Very, very nervous. Are you a little more calm, clearly, on your score you are, and why so?
Yeah, I had them winning this game by 11 points. I think they'll get the job done in the end. I think this is a really talented team. We were high on this Indiana team. We thought that Cignetti was a really good coach and thought the JMU transfers would adjust well to the next level. But for them to be 6-0 with a really favorable schedule the rest of the way this season, I don't think was on anyone's bingo's cards. Big noon kickoff is at this game. The Fox Countdown Show will be there in Bloomington. This crowd is going to be very loud and very proud at noon. This is a big matchup, a big game. This is a team that under Tom Allen in the past, they were a solid team some years, but they were never really elite at any situation. They hired Cignetti, which was immediately a great hire, and they've proven that they can be elite under him. I think this offense is just a lot better than Nebraska, and they'll have an opportunity to really show that in this matchup. I think Rourke's a really incredible quarterback who's really confident in the pocket and knows what he's doing. I like what he can do in this game. I expect him to have a solid day here. I think Indiana will win this game. I think it's certainly possible that Nebraska keeps it close because their defense is that elite, but I like Indiana to put up some points early, set the tempo, be strong in this game, get the crowd rallied behind them, and Nebraska won't be able to catch up. They'll find themselves behind in this situation. Raiola might make a mistake or two and cost them the game in the end. I like Indiana to win this one, move to 7-0, which is extremely impressive considering, again, where this team has been in previous years. And I said, about that schedule, they got to play Washington, Michigan State, and Michigan after this, so I think they could win all three of those games potentially. Playing Washington and Michigan at home certainly is favorable. Travel to Columbus to play Ohio State obviously is quite tough, and then they play Purdue to wrap out the season. So they could certainly be looking at 1 or 2 losses this year, and in the first year under Cignetti, that is an incredible start for the Hoosiers. This team is so fun to watch. I'm excited to check out this game on Saturday. A very exciting team here that I'm picking to win this one.
Yeah, I mean, this is certainly a very good, respectable schedule the rest of the way, including Ohio State on the road. So a lot here for Indiana to be proud of, and I think they'll get the job done. But again, very nervous for this one. Should be a good old-fashioned Big Ten contest. As always, Nick, appreciate you joining me. This is a fun game that we have on store that we originally probably didn't, circle at the beginning of the season.
Looking forward to this one. This is going to be a great matchup. Big Noon's going to be there. I'm excited to see what this game looks like in Bloomington.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.